Today, we are going to look at developing speaking skills for secondary students. We're going to look at three areas. Number one, why don't students like speaking English? Number two, how can we get students to speak English? And number three, we're going to look at some engaging activities. So, the first question, why don't students speak English in class? And there are many reasons for this. Maybe they're not interested in the topics that we're asking them to speak about. Maybe they don't have enough language to be able to speak. Maybe they don't understand the task that the teacher sets for them. Maybe they're not interested in the speaking task. You know, maybe the topic is boring, but also maybe the speaking task is boring too. Maybe they lack confidence. Many teenagers are quite shy, and speaking can be very stressful for them, especially speaking in a second language. And they're afraid of making mistakes and embarrassing themselves in front of their classmates. So, how can we get them to speak English? So, how can we get students to speak? Firstly, we need to provide interesting topics. Secondly, we need to provide the vocabulary and the background knowledge they need to be able to speak. We need to teach clear pronunciation too. We also need to have clear instructions and objectives for the speaking task. And finally, we need to provide interesting but not too challenging speaking activities. So firstly, we need to provide interesting topics for your students to speak about. Now you can see from the book the different units that we have, from home through to cities around the world. And in those units, we try to use very interesting topics for the students to communicate about. Now, one interesting activity that you can do to help your students to activate their background knowledge is a pie chart activity. So you can draw a three-part pie chart. In one part we have nouns, in one part we have verbs, and in one part we have adjectives or adverbs. Now, when you start a new topic, you can ask your students to work together and write different kinds of words related to the topic in that pie chart. Then they can work together and they can start to combine these words into sentences. And when they're working together, they can start to use the conjunctions they need, the linking words, to form correct sentences and maybe even create a whole paragraph. So this kind of activity activates their background knowledge and gets them communicating straight away. The next point is very important. Now, Vietnamese and English are very different languages, and pronunciation is very difficult for learners of English. And poor pronunciation can lead to many problems. So it can make, obviously, their English difficult to be understood. It can make them less confident. It's frustrating if you think you're speaking well, but actually the person you're speaking to doesn't understand what you're saying because of your pronunciation. It can cause many misunderstandings and confusion, and it has a lasting impact on your students. So this is the approach to pronunciation in the book. We start off with the whole meaning level, where we focus on sentence stress and intonation. Then, at the sentence level, we also look at elements of connected speech. How do words join together when we say them? And at the individual word level, we'll look at word stress. How do you stress the different syllables of certain words? And at the final level, we look at the individual sounds of words as well. So with this approach to pronunciation, we can really help your students to speak clearly and be understood correctly. So the next part is to provide interesting but not too challenging speaking activities. Now, you know from the book that there are a number of speaking activities in the practice parts of the lessons and also in the speaking parts of the lessons. So what we're going to do is look at those activities now and also look at some more activities that you might be able to use in class. So, as you can see, this is a controlled practice activity from the book. And this is an opportunity for students to speak together in pairs and role play. Now, the activity keeps the students interested because they can swap roles, they can replace, substitute different parts of the conversation, and at the end, they can practice with their own ideas. This is a great speaking activity to build up their confidence and build up their language, to get them to be able to more freely produce the language. Another great activity that you could use is paper plane. Now, in this activity, what you want is you prepare a list of questions and you ask the students to write down their answers on their own piece of paper. You can see here, we've got an example: your height, your hair, your skin color, what you're wearing, your favorite food, for example. And students write their answers and fold the paper into a paper airplane and throw it across the classroom. Now, the next step is that each student will pick up a plane and say the information that's on the paper. And from that information, the class has to guess who they are talking about. And this activity is a fun way to get the students speaking, and you can get them to focus on the topic or on the grammar structure that you're teaching at the moment. Another great activity is called Dictogloss. Now, in this activity, you will read a, let's say, 50-word paragraph to students twice, and they will write down key words. And what you want to do is you have your students working in groups, pairs, to try and reconstruct the paragraph. Try and make it again, and this time probably in their own words. And this is a great way of getting students to communicate with each other and work together to create correct language. The next activity is read, peek, speak. Now, students work in pairs. Student A will read a paragraph to student B. The next step, student A will retell that paragraph, but they are only allowed to peek quickly at the paper. They're not allowed to read, they're just allowed to look quickly, remind themselves, and then say. The third step is that student A now has to retell the paragraph without looking at the paper. So what happens there is they have full support, a little support, and then no support. The final step is for student B, who's listened to the paragraph 3 times now. They get to retell what they heard. So this is a great activity to allow students to develop their creativity and develop their own language. Now, another great activity for you to do with your students is to have them do mind maps. Now, you can get them to read a text. For example, this text is about how teenagers use their free time, and get them to work together and develop a mind map. So they take the main points of the text and they put the key points in their own words, just notes. And then they use this mind map to retell the story or the paragraph in their own words. You can see here we've got changing teen interests, and we've got some of the key points from the text. And the students can expand on what they read, and it gives them a chance to be creative, give their opinion as well. Okay, so in summary, to get your students speaking, we need to provide interesting topics. We need to provide the vocab and the background knowledge they need. We need to teach clear pronunciation. We also need clear instructions and objectives. And we have to provide interesting but not too challenging speaking activities. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks very much. Goodbye.